Mission Impossible 2 is directed by John Woo, and to this day acts as the biggest hard left turn that the franchise has ever taken. And while I think the term guilty pleasure gets tossed around a lot, I think it applies a bit to the second installment in the series. Everything about Mission Impossible 2 is a product of its time. The look, style, and musical choices all scream the year 2000, when The Matrix was king of action films, and dramas like Gladiator were hitting cineplexes. A lot of people dislike this movie because it doesn't feel like a Mission Impossible film. And I tend to agree. This feels like a 90s Die Hard sequel, rather than a tense espionage thriller. These stylistic choices aged the movie big time, where even the 4K print of this film screams 2000. In fact, I'd say the Brian De Palma movie has aged far better than this has. Now, I love John Woo's Hong Kong action films. I think The Killer and Hard Boiled rank among the best action films ever made. But of course, John Woo's transition to Hollywood never quite took off. His style never gelled with what Hollywood studios and producers wanted him to make. In Hong Kong, he had control over what he wanted to make. And when everything came together, we got amazing action films. He didn't have that same freedom in America, and things just seem to get lost in translation. Of course, there are fans of Woo's American works like Hard Target and Face Off. I know many people who love Face Off, but many other people would consider them guilty pleasures. I think John Woo and Tom Cruise had the best of intentions making MI2. Cruise obviously wanted different directors, different voices for each entry in the series. And John Woo had been at the height of his popularity. By this point, he'd made a few films in Hollywood, so I don't doubt anyone was trying to sabotage the movie or didn't quite pull their weight. It's just that if this movie wasn't titled Mission Impossible 2, there'd be a whole different perception to it. If it was just a John Woo film with his own original characters, the reception would be different. This movie is all about trying to get a hold of this virus called Chimera, and this was before movies started using the terms biological weapons. Because biological weapon just sounds more legit, right? But this virus is in the hands of a rogue IMF agent, Sean Ambrose, played by Doug Ray Scott, who, just a reminder, had to drop out of playing Wolverine to stay in this film. So Ethan Hunt has to go on this mission to destroy the virus and stop Ambrose from using it. In freaking Sydney of all places. So much of this movie is just laughably enjoyable and ridiculous. You've got Ethan receiving his mission by someone flying to him in a helicopter and shooting a missile at him. And you've got Tom Cruise's sunglasses exploding to reveal the title of the movie. It's something you'd only find in a movie that came out around 2000. And to be quite honest, the mask rips in this movie are just golden. This movie takes a step back and gives Ethan a Bond girl as a girlfriend. What was interesting about the first Mission Impossible was that Ethan was dedicated to his allegiance to his team. You don't see him giving into temptation, which was refreshing. He was focused on the mission rather than being a womanizer like Bond. Here, Tandy Newton takes on the Bond girl role, and despite the character being fairly capable as a thief in her own right, the movie uses her as more of a plot device to get us to the villain. The plot of her having to use her body to lure in the bad guy isn't really new to spy films. In fact, we just had Red Sparrow be a whole movie about that, but the way that it's executed here probably wouldn't be done in 2018. I actually think Tandy Newton does a fine job with what she's given. Watching it now, she's just acting the way that she's told. I really don't think she deserved a Razzie nomination for her performance. This movie marks the only random appearance of Anthony Hopkins as Ethan's boss. You can tell he was just grabbing a quick paycheck, and I doubt he spent more than a day filming his scenes. However, Mission Impossible 2 does play into the idea that Ethan Hunt might actually be crazy, where our villain calls him out for being willing to jump at an insane height without hesitation. This seed of development grows over future films where we start to analyze Ethan as a character, and why he does these insane stunts. With the opening of him rock climbing without a harness, we kind of know that he gets off from the adrenaline rush, and would rather put himself in danger than do things any other way. They don't go too much into developing that here, but as I said, it's something that is carried over into future sequels. Now, the Mission Impossible franchise is of course known for its insane stunts in action, but Mission Impossible 2 is kind of lacking until the last 30 minutes, when we get an epic extended car chase from our villain's secret lair, through the Australian bush to a final showdown between Ethan and Sean. It's all perfectly ridiculous, with plenty of slow motion, and the guitar riff fueled cover of the Mission Impossible theme sprinkled throughout, all designed to be badass and awesome, but the class and finer craftsmanship of the other films isn't really here. The shootouts are pure John Woo, with slow-mo bullet time and dubs aplenty. And because this movie came out after The Matrix, you've got that added Eurotrance music track added to it. In fact, even though I think Hans Zimmer did a pretty decent job with scoring the movie, it is essentially a mix of The Matrix and Gladiator, with a lot of bizarre choir segments when Tandy Newton is shot in slow motion. There is also the Biosite break-in, which is designed to be an amped up version of the classic Langley break-in from the first movie, where this time Ethan is hanging down from helicopters and sliding through big vents. It's fun to watch, but nowhere near as visually interesting as the Langley break-in. Also, this time the team is just kind of there. It's much simpler with less backstabbing. Ving Rhames is back, as well as an Aussie dude that never gets spoken of ever again in the franchise. But the movie is much more focused on Ethan Hunt being the one-man army who can do anything, which is fine for someone like James Bond or Jason Bourne, but Mission Impossible is meant to be all about the team. And unfortunately, it isn't really until Mission Impossible 3 that we start having a continuous roster of IMF agents, and not just Ving Rhames showing up. Mission Impossible 2 is such a bizarre enigma in the Mission Impossible franchise. All of the other films are at least good, with the latest ones I'd argue being great. Mission Impossible 2 sits in that guilty pleasure zone, where you can easily check your brain out and enjoy a ridiculous action movie that could only exist in the early 2000s. Its tone and style is so vastly different to the other films, it's worth catching it as its own experiment. But at the same time, this is the movie that put the Mission Impossible franchise on hold for 6 years, so it is worth considering that point. If you've got nothing to do on a lazy Sunday and you just want to put something dumb on to enjoy it, I think this is perfect. You can just chuck it on and enjoy. Otherwise, if you are new to the series, check out the other films. They are much better and far more faithful Mission Impossible films to see. Mission Impossible 2 gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Guys, I hope you like this review. If you want to see more reviews just like this one, stay right here for your Mono Fix. Bye guys.